It's my pleasure to be here this morning with you, and I'm going to be talking about misconceptions, also try to bring a complementary angle to the concept of, to this study about misconceptions, especially by comparing misconceptions to controversies and what we mean by those different terms, and also contrasting this, how these two terms relate to scientific knowledge and to truth. So it's quite well known that scientific controversies play a significant role in the growth of scientific knowledge. This is something that has been much studied, especially in social studies of science and social studies of knowledge. It appears that scientific controversies are a fairly regular pattern in the growth of scientific knowledge, and this has been the case for centuries. Controversies about heliocentrism versus geocentrism, Newton quarreling with Descartes about the nature of light, Pasteur and Pouchet quarreling about spontaneous generation, and there have been many controversies that have been studied in social studies of science. Also in Origins of Life, there are controversies. Juli Peretto had a beautiful paper in 2005 in which he listed in particular what he thought were three major controversies in Origins of Life: information first versus metabolism first, presence of membranes or not at the origin of life, heterotrophy versus autotrophy. Now, it seems that we have clear cases of scientific controversies, but when we see something like this on the board here, I don't know if you can see it from the rear, but it says the Big Bang after all these years still just a theory. It seems that we're dealing with something different from a controversy, and this is probably what we mean then when we use the concept of misconceptions. So the questions we'd like to raise is, how do misconceptions differ from controversies? Are misconceptions stuff that we see in science, within scientists, or about science, outside of science somehow? And I'd also like to ask questions about to which extent we should worry more or not about misconceptions in Origins of Life research. So first, a few words about scientific controversy. What is a scientific controversy? So let's go back to etymology. Controversy, the word controversy comes from the Latin controversus, which means turned in opposite directions. So with a controversy, we have an argument and the opposite argument. So if I say white, you say black. We have a controversy here. If I say no, you say yes. We have arguments that go in opposite directions. This has led many social scientists to define scientific controversy as being a debate. So there is, in a scientific controversy, an exchange of arguments. This means that there are different parties, and there are at least two parties in a controversy that exchange arguments. And what's specific about scientific controversy is that the exchange of arguments is about specific scientific knowledge claims, right? It's not about a political choice, or it's not about aesthetic preferences. It's about knowledge claims about nature, therefore scientific knowledge claims. The objects of controversies are very diverse. Controversies can be about facts. Scientists can have arguments about the existence of particular facts, about their relevance and their inclusion in a particular body of knowledge. Controversies can be about the theoretical constructs themselves. They can be about the theories, the models, the hypotheses being used. They can be in particular about the meaning of the theoretical terms, the reference of the theoretical terms, the ontological commitments that are put together with a theories, model, or hypothesis. Controversies can also be about the formalism itself, the type of mathematical or formal form that these theories, models, or hypotheses can take. Controversies, lastly, can also be about, more generally, methodological questions. They can concern observation techniques, the limits of instrumentation. They can concern also experimental design. They can also be about epistemological presuppositions or preferences, such as what we take to be the nature of experiment, or what we take to be the evidential relationship that is supposed to hold between the empirical base and the theories or the scientific claim. What is interesting in a controversy is that usually we expect the controversy to become settled at one point in time. And the key, the way we usually expect controversies to be settled is by a matter of facts, right? We expect that nature is going to tell us which scientific claim is right and which is wrong. So therefore, we expect empirical factors to play a key role in telling us, in a way, which scientific claim is right and wrong, and in settling the controversy. However, this has been quite studied in philosophy of science. It is quite difficult to really pin down what we mean by such things as theoretical verification or confirmation typically, or even refutation. We all very often hear that it's easy to refute a scientific claim, but it's not that easy to follow Popper in this respect. It has been shown that typically underdetermination of theories by observations are very much present. And this has led several sociologists and social studies, people who study science from a sociological angle, to mention the role that some sociological factors may play indeed in some controversy settlement. One point that is clear, however, is the role of the scientific community in the settlement, the role of the institutional actors that is key in settling some controversies. Just to take an example, you may have heard about this water memory controversy in the 1980s. Following a paper by Vilnius and his team in Nature, this triggered a huge controversy in the scientific community, but also in the public arena. The way the controversy was settled was through two main actors, institutional actors. First, Nature, the journal, and its editors, and second, the French Medical Research Institute in CERN, who took disciplinary measures against Vilnius and his team. And the journal Nature also played a key role in settling this controversy very quickly. So this is just to stress the importance of the institutional actors in controversy settlement. In Origins of Life, I believe there are tons of controversies. I've already quoted a few. And this, I guess we could sort all those controversies depending on the type of objects that they deal with. There can be controversies about facts. For instance, we heard about microfossils and their interpretation as biogenic structures, the Schopp's brazier type of controversies. There can be about theoretical constructs when we have a theory like heterotrophy or autotrophy. They can be about methodology or epistemological preferences, and here I'm thinking about definitions of light, for instance. Now, what is a scientific misconception, and how can we contrast scientific misconception to controversy? Etymology again. Misconception, where is this word coming from? Well, it comes from the prefix mis, meaning bad, of wrong, and the word conception, an act of conceiving. Initially, act of becoming pregnant, and then the meaning now is act of taking into the mind somehow. So a misconception here is something like a false idea. There is something erroneous in what I think. If I have a misconception, if I think that tomatoes are a vegetable, I think something wrong. And there is also a fairly normative take to it. That is to say, if I think that tomatoes are a vegetable, I'm not only wrong, but I should think differently, right? I should think that tomatoes are fruit. There are many different types of misconceptions that have been studied in many areas, and in particular in science, in many areas of science. And this is when we talk about, in particular, scientific misconceptions. Scientific misconceptions, I found out, have been much studied in education science and in psychology. The key questions that are asked are typically questions about concept formation. How do kids, children, students also develop concepts, and how they change some of these concepts? So the key questions is how misconceptions arise, why they arise, which misconceptions are there, among which groups of people, and typically also how do we go about correcting these misconceptions. How do we know when there is a misconception? Typically, we can assess that there is a misconception when we find out that what a person believes does not match what is known to be scientifically correct. So this presupposes that we have also at least two parties involved, the person holding the misconception and the person who is judging. And this presupposes that one party, the person judging, already knows the truth. And this also presupposes that that party judges the other party as having a false belief, as believing something that is not this truth. Misconceptions can be about different things, like controversies. They can be about facts, about theoretical constructs. They can be also about methodology. And there are misconceptions that have been documented and studied across all the sciences, in physics, in chemistry, in biology. We heard from Puri, typical misconceptions in evolutionary biology. But there are also very strong misconceptions among children and even among young students in physics, typically. People have trouble with the concept of acceleration and its relationships to force. And many children and students tend to equate force and speed instead of force and acceleration, typically. Interestingly, there are also many misconceptions about the nature of scientific inquiry, and this has been, there have been very interesting studies there. Misconceptions about what science is about, how science works, how theories are discovered, how theories and scientific knowledge may be justified. There have been different misconceptions being studied about the concept of life and its origins. There have been many studies about the concept of life, about how children develop this concept, and this goes back to work by Piaget in the early 20th century. Children were asked to classify different types of objects as being living, non-living, or dead, and the idea was to understand this perception of life and how it evolves when children develop. How children classify things like plants, animals, microorganisms, rocks, fire, stream, even bones as being alive or not. I found some, in my literature survey, I found some work also being done on misconceptions that concern the limits of life. It seems that there are misconceptions around that cannot be life without oxygen, that more complex organisms also are better able to survive in extreme environments than simpler organisms. And there's obviously many or several misconceptions specifically about the origins of life. There is creationism that is extremely well studied, obviously, but there's also many more subtle misconceptions laying around, such as the misconception that the origin of life problem is nearly solved, for instance. Now, the point I'd like to make is to try to see how misconceptions on the one hand and controversies on the other relate to scientific knowledge and also the type of different epistemic questions that they may raise. If we take controversies, 5 minutes, but I started much later.
No,
yeah, right. Now I have the microphone. No, just kidding. It's not going to be long. With controversies, typically, we have two opposing parties on the top. One says something, the other one says something different. And the scientific community is somehow agnostic at start, right? We don't know which one is right before settlement, when the controversy starts. After settlement, the scientific community makes a statement that something is right, in particular, in this case here, the proposition P. What we see here is there is a change in what the scientific community believes, and in the case of a controversy, when a controversy is settled, typically we take the claim, one of the two claims, to be new scientific knowledge. Now, if we compare this to misconceptions, the start is somehow similar in that we have at least two opposing parties, one saying something and the other one saying something different. And I'm going to take this one as being the misconception. But we know that this is the misconception because the opposing party here is referring to the scientific community that is saying that this is the truth. Now, after not really settlement, but after the correction of the misconception, we see that what has changed here is what is really in the mind of the person that was who was holding the misconception earlier. But the scientific community is still believing the same thing. In this particular case, there is no creation of any new knowledge, right? The knowledge is all the same. We all knew the same thing. We knew the same thing before, and we know the same thing today. So in this case, I believe this is a very sharp contrast between controversies and misconceptions. This contrast can also be seen in the type of epistemic questions that controversies raise on one hand and misconceptions raise on the other. The type of questions that are raised with controversies are, well, can they be settled at all? How is a claim in a controversy transformed into scientific knowledge once we have a settlement? So here we have questions about the nature of scientific knowledge or scientific justification. There are questions about how central controversies are in science. Are they necessary or not in the construction of new knowledge? On the other hand, with misconceptions, the type of questions that are raised are not so much epistemic in their content. They're more questions that relate to education, to sorting out which misconceptions are there, among which groups of people, how do these misconceptions arise, how do they spread within those groups, do they come from factual misunderstanding, from misinformation, from social influences. And then the key question with misconceptions is typically, how do we go about correcting them? Can we do something to prevent them, and can we do something to correct them? And here are the questions that come up are questions of educational strategies, but also questions about resistance factors, be they individual, cultural, or sociological. Why should we worry about these more in origins of life than elsewhere? I would say that for controversies, since origins of life research is anyway a part of science, it's not surprising that there are controversies. The key question would be if we have something specific to worry about origins of life that will make maybe controversies more frequent and maybe more durable. And maybe this could be linked to the fact that we are facing in origins of life research more underdetermination. There are very, very few historical traces. We're facing the n=1 problem. So this could lead possibly to more controversies than in all other parts of science. On the other hand, because some of the historical record has been very likely permanently erased, maybe we could be facing more durable underdetermination, and therefore more durable controversies, possibly leading to theoretical pluralism. Now, how about misconceptions? And here I think to answer this question, as has been pointed already in the audience in one of the questions, we need to sort out two things. First, misconceptions inside the scientific community, and then misconceptions outside. If we look at misconceptions inside the research community, I would call this internal misconceptions. I guess it's important to ask to address this, especially because they could lead to false knowledge if there are misconceptions inside the scientific communities, and if these misconceptions enter inferential type arguments, then these could indeed lead to false knowledge. So that could be a threat to the credibility of science, and these need to be carefully investigated. I haven't seen much literature on that topic. Do we have a higher risk in origins of life studies? Probably yes, because we're dealing with very complex research questions that requires multidisciplinarity. And multidisciplinarity leads to many expert, non-expert exchanges, and therefore to many oversimplifications. So I believe there could be a higher risk here. How about misconceptions outside the research community? I call these external misconceptions. The type of impact it could have on the creation of knowledge would be more indirect, because the knowledge is created inside the research community, not outside, right? But misconceptions could have an impact on our educational programs, could have an impact on public funding priorities, could have an impact on the number of future scientists, typically. Is there a higher risk of external misconceptions impacting also origins of life research? outside the research community? Probably yes, because again, we're dealing here with a very complex question, very complex research programs that are difficult to explain to the general public. We're dealing with questions that have no direct application. We're dealing with questions that may have an ethical, that may raise ethical concerns and risk, and we're also going head-to-head against religions. So just in short, I've tried to clarify a little bit what we may understand as controversies, scientific controversies, try to point some differences when we look at misconceptions and how these two different types of concept raises different questions, different epistemic questions, and looked at their impact on origins of life research. And the short, and very, very short, the take-home message is anyway to beware of misconceptions. Thank you.